Hello, and welcome to Prodrummer by East West. I'm David Earle, and I'll be your host as we explore this expertly designed drum kit and performance library from some of the best producers in the business. Prodrummer was a collaboration of Doug Rogers, Mark Spike Stent, and Joe Ciccarelli. Prodrummer Volume 1 is Spike Stent's work, who's the creative mind behind the production of the likes of Björk, Usher, Muse, Massive Attack, and many others. His signature sound has both a toe in electronic and acoustic production. He's won 3 Grammy Awards and has been nominated several other times. Prodrummer Volume 2 is the vision of Joe Ciccarelli. Joe is a seasoned pro who's worked with the White Stripes, U2, Elton John, My Morning Jacket, and also many others. He's won 10 Grammy Awards himself, and he's a fantastic engineer. Both Prodrummer 1 and 2 were closely supervised and augmented by the involvement of Doug Rogers. He made sure that there were no compromises in the quality of the sound libraries. Doug's libraries are legendary, of course, and his collaboration with Spike Stent and Joe Ciccarelli give us yet another weapon in our arsenals. Prodrummer is a collection of pro-level drum kits from world-class producers and also a great collection of grooves played by Steven Sedelnik, drummer for Seal, Massive Attack, and Madonna. There's over 100 gigabytes of 24-bit, 44.1 kilohertz sample rate sound to explore in Prodrummer. There's also many other goodies that we'll have to go through, so let's just jump in. Okay, first things first, let's navigate the library. When I hit the browser and I go to Prodrummer Spike Stent, we get 7 different kits, and then we get the rooms that they were played in, so we have an idea of the ambience of that kit. The only one that's different is hybrid. And what that hybrid kit is it's basically taking pieces of all of these other kits and giving us the ability to mix all those pieces together. The last folder that you see is called Kits with Reference MIDI. So when we select these, what they do is they automatically load a groove in that plays really well on that kit. As we go into the folders, you'll note that the folder has a number of different preset kits, and these are differently produced kits. So they're mixed differently, and this is wonderful. We're basically getting an insight into how Spike Stent mixes drums with each one of these. Then down below, we have 2 other folders that give us a light version of the kit and a powerful system. Now, the light version definitely has all of the same sounds, but it doesn't have this deep scripting and the powerful programming that's going on in the powerful systems. With the light kits, it's more like a standard drum kit that you would get in a drum library. You hit the drum and you'll get round robin and things like that. But in the powerful system, you get much deeper scripting. One example of that is when you hit a tom twice, the first hit is going to be a sample that sounds like a tom that's been hit just out of the blue, and the second sample is going to be a tom that takes into account the fact that the tom had been hit before. So the reverberance is going to be different, which is pretty awesome, and there's a lot of examples of that deep scripting going on in the powerful systems. I suggest that if you're going to use this library seriously, you should get an SSD drive, because things will load really quickly. You'll be able to really hear what these kits are capable of, and it just makes for a much quicker user experience, and it'll speed up your workflow quite a bit. Now, the Spike Stent libraries, you get 7 kits, and then you have the kits with the reference MIDI. The Joe Ciccarelli are a little different. You get 4 kits. The 4th one is a hybrid. These 3 have, Studio 1, Studio 2 booth, and Studio 2 live room, and you get the kits with reference MIDI. But what's a little different about Joe's kits is that he also used tape. So you have the ability to select these kits that were recorded to tape to get the natural wow and flutter of tape on that recording. And it's really interesting. You can mix that in very interesting ways and get some cool sounds. He's also giving us his preset mixes, and then we also have a light and a powerful system. I'm going to move back to the Spike Stent library, and I'm going to choose, I'll choose a hybrid kit. And you'll see down here that it shows you it's loading. I'm loading off SSD, so it goes pretty fast. And I'll click on the player. So what we have here is a picture of the kit. It's a representation of the kit. And if you click on these individual elements, you can hear them. So this is the representation of the kit. Down below, we have something really interesting. Essentially, it's a song builder. So what we can do is we can go into a library of drum grooves and build our own song. To start, I can click the trash can. Well, I have to select a region here first. Click the trash can, and it's open and it's ready for business. So I can select grooves, select a groove that I like, play it, and I can bring it right down. I can hit play. Then I might pick a different region, pull that down. Now, not only do we have the main grooves, but there are also fills. There's full songs, which are entire arrangements. So it's pretty neat. And it's a fun way that you can kind of build your own song here. You can build your own underbed for your entire song, for your production. If I hit play here, it plays using the play engine. But if I choose sync to host, now when I hit play in Logic, Logic's now the transport for this, and they're synced together beautifully. So that's the Grooves tab. You'll notice that there's genre, subgenre, style, type, and time signature. And then down below, you just take whatever you want and you drag it right in. So I'll deselect grooves and go over to drums. When I select drums, I see the individual drums. It's telling me what type of drum I'm using or cymbal, even the brand name. So I've got Zildjians and Gretsch. You know, it's a Gretsch kit. I'm using a Orange County snare. And you can tune these by hitting the T. You can change their gain. You can take them out. And if you select this disclosure triangle, you can see every other hi-hat that you can mix in. And on the stent kits, you even get a tambourine or an 808 hi-hat, which is pretty cool. If I hit play, you can hear that obviously the hi-hat is now an 808 hi-hat, which is pretty rad. It allows you to select between all these different drums and cymbals. Now this is because I have the hybrid kit, which loads a lot more drums in than when you have the standard preset kits. But it can be a lot of fun, and I highly suggest mixing and matching your kit to see what you like. One really important tool in Prodrummer's arsenal is to be able to layer up drums. The most popular drum to layer up would be the snare. If I choose this disclosure triangle, I can add in whatever snare articulation I want. So you can see all of the different types of snares here we have to choose from. And when you choose a plus, it's going to add it into the list and take the plus away. I select the background, and we can see them all layered up here. We can go into tweak mode on each of these and tweak their volume, their tuning, and their fine tuning. So once you get that mixed together just the way you like it, that becomes part of your kit. And you have one snare that has 5 articulations all playing at the same time. That's very, very handy. All right, so let me get out of tweak mode here for a second. And I come over to the velocity processor. The velocity processor, it looks an awful lot like a compressor, right? And it's usually on by default in the kits, but it's pretty simple. What it's doing is we have our velocity here from 0 to 127. And when you pass a certain velocity, it's either going to increase the velocity faster, or if you have a ratio of 1 to 1, basically it's a fully linear curve. So this is 0 to 127 in velocity. Now, as I turn that ratio up, basically the highest velocity that you play can only be that loud. And when you reach this threshold is when it starts to scale the values of the velocity. So this isn't like a compressor. It's not like an audio compressor that's going to be an automated volume knob. This is actually for velocity and how the drum is going to react according to velocity. So the way that it is now, we're never going to actually get to the highest velocity. The highest velocity that we have is about here. Now, if I turn the ratio the other direction, we get the effect of getting to the highest velocity when we get past, 50% velocity. So it sort of instantly goes to full velocity. And if you wanted to have that just whacking snare, just whacking the whole time and not have to whack your keyboard super hard, that's the way that you can achieve it. So threshold is where it's going to start. Ratio is how much it's going to attenuate the velocity or increase the velocity. And then you have your makeup, which brings up everything. So it's laid out a lot like a compressor, but since you're doing velocity, it's all about how velocity is going to be processed, not audio. So you can choose to have it on or off. Over here, we have some additional options. You can export the song. And if we do that, then we're able to take this song as MIDI and then drag it into our host. So right now I'm using Logic. All right, now that we've kind of checked out the player from a high level, I'd like to talk about the mixer, because the mixer is pretty amazing in Prodrummer, and I'd like to show you just what they've done to create these processed kits. I'm going to click on the mixer tab now. And what we see here is a representation of the entire kit output, which is going to main, left, and right now. If I wanted to go to auxiliaries in my DAW, I can come to the output of these individual channels and send them out to individual auxiliaries in my DAW. So main, left, and right is going to be 1 and 2. Default can be set to 3 and 4, 1 and 2. Default is always going to go to the output here. So as we go down these channel strips, essentially what we're looking at are the different mics that were used. We've got a kick in mic, a kick out mic, snare top, snare bottom, hi-hat, floor tom, rack tom 1 and 2, overheads. This is going to be a stereo channel strip. Room 1, room 2. So these are mics that are out in the room. And then we have kit 1 and kit 2, which are actually other spa mics that are in the room. And they just give kind of a general vibe. They're not made to sound pristine. They're made to give sort of a vibe to the whole thing, which is really kind of neat. We have our standard channel strip here, which gives you volume, muting, soloing, an effects section. So this is essentially an inserted effects section just for this channel strip. And when we get into that in a second, it's pretty amazing. The meters are in dBVU, not dBFS, so that's something you might want to take into account. They don't go to 0. They actually read more like a VU meter. At the top, we have panning, and then we have a reverb send. Down at the bottom, we have bleed. So we can actually turn up and down the bleed between microphones. So when a drum is not being hit, but it's in proximity to another drum that is being hit, you'll hear it. Okay, now I said I was going to get into these effects buttons, right? So if I go to something like the snare top and click effects, you'll see that I have an amp simulator, something called Homicide, and then I have an entire SSL channel strip. So we have essentially an SSL mixer mixing this drum kit. Now in this case, we actually don't have anything going on. I don't see the input turned on, and we don't have Homicide clicked in or anything. And that's probably because this is the master kit. So when Spike was putting this together, he was mixing levels and panning and all that sort of thing. On the main output, though, we have some bus effects. So when I click on effects, you'll see that not only do we have the amp simulator and Homicide, which aren't turned on, we can tell by these power buttons, but we also have a convolution reverb and a compressor, a bus compressor. This is based off of the G series bus compressor. The SSL effects are actually included in all play engines now, and we also get Homicide in all engines and amp simulator. Now, amp simulator and Homicide I need to talk about a little bit. I need to go back into the browser here. I need to choose something that's a little bit more processed. So I'll go in a hybrid kit, and I'll choose EDM. Let's have a look at this mixer. So when we look at the mixer, we instantly know that some of the effects sections have been turned on because they're blue. If I click on it, I can see that the input has been turned on the SSL channel strip. I also know that the amp simulator and Homicide are not turned on for this channel strip because their power buttons aren't turned on. Input is turned on, EQ is in, and there's just the tiniest bit of EQ on here. There's some here that's boosting quite a bit. No transient shaping, because anything that has a power button that's turned off, that section is not going to be working. So it's kind of cool. You can actually go into these channel strips and see how a pro would deal with his drum kit pieces. So there's our input, there's some EQ, cool. And if I go to the Master Effects section, you'll see that the amp simulator is actually turned on for the whole kit. So the whole kit's going through a guitar amp, which is pretty cool. And the guitar amp has all of these different impulse responses that you can go through. And it's pretty rad. I mean, not just a Carvin amplifier, but like a Carvin amplifier that's been recorded with a Sennheiser 421 microphone or a D112. So that's pretty neat. Down below, we see that the input is turned on, which means our SSL channel strip is activated. Very little processing going on, though, from what I can see. But our convolution reverb is turned on, and it's turned on to the East-West Studio One front mics. Look at all these impulse responses. These are also available with every version of Play. Not only are there East-West's famous hall and studios and chambers and rooms, but we also get plates. They actually have like old EMT 140 plates. They have the EMT 240 electronic reverb, which is pretty rad. And we get impulse responses of giant cathedrals and halls and things like that, which are pretty wonderful too. Now, the amp simulator's fairly simple to understand. We can either insert it pre or post. Pretty simple. We have drive, bass, middle, treble. So this is for your EQ. Dry to wet, and then our master output. Below that, we have Omicide. Now let's talk a little bit about Omicide, because this is now included on every Play engine that you get for any instrument that you have. And the ability to shape sound using Omicide is amazing. So I'd like to actually pull up a kit that is using Omicide and kind of have a look at it and see how Omicide is working. When I go into the browser and I look up the kits with reference MIDI, it's always a good idea to look at stuff that says like, Hop Soup or EDM or something like Dark Scratchy. Those are usually going to be the kind of kits that have funky names that are going to be using Omicide. Let's look at the mixer for this one. So I've got Hop Soup up here. It's the first one. PS means powerful system. And it's using Omicide on both the output and the snare bottom. So let's check out what it's doing on the snare, because this is an individual channel. Okay, that's without it. Now check it out. Way different, right? So let's choose the editor that allows us to view Omicide. So what Omicide is essentially a 4-band saturation plugin that gives you all kinds of control over distortion and saturation for 4 independent bands within the sound. So that means that you can distort your low end different than your mid-range, your low mids, your high mids, and your highs. And you can see the 4 different bands here, and these 3 knobs are the crossover points between those bands. Below that, we have things like a noise gate, we have the shaping of it, we have gain, and then we have the actual models that we're going to use. So standard, XXX, and odd. And these are all the different types of saturation and distortion that you can add to this. Now, Omicide is almost a plugin that I should have its own course for, because it's pretty deep and intense. You can create these different templates for Omicide, and then you can come up here and you can select between them using the morphing tool. So you can morph between different settings. It's pretty amazing. And the more you experiment with it, I think the more you're going to get out of it. You can get some really interesting effects. Now, this is an example of Omicide being used on an individual channel. Let's see what it sounds like when we have it on the master bus. So I'll go over here to this X, exit out. I'm going to exit out at this channel strip as well. And I'm going to go into the master output. We also have Omicide here. I'm going to turn the power on and look at the editor. So I'll exit out of there, and let's hear it without that. So you can hear how much more dynamic and, Spike Stent definitely put this kit together to hit that homicide in a certain kind of way. So when we turn it on, it flattens out and becomes this kind of distorted, lovely thing. So that's homicide. Now, let's talk briefly about how we can get a song into Logic from the player, Song Builder. If we go into the grooves here, there's a type of groove called a full song. Essentially, that's going to give us a song that goes from beginning to end and allows us a rhythmic backbone that we could build our song around if we wanted to. So I just double click and it pops it down here. To get this into Logic, let's say if I wanted to take that and put the MIDI file into Logic so I can edit it, it's pretty simple. You just drag and drop. When you do that, ask you if you want to import tempo. Say sure. Wasn't exactly on. There we go. So now it's in Logic and we can edit it there. I could turn off sync to host and it'll just play that MIDI file. Now I could also just delete this as well because the MIDI is being played from Logic. Now there may be a case where you want to export this to a different DAW. In order to do that, on the lower right-hand side, we can export the entire song and I'll send it to my desktop. Now I've sent it to my desktop and what I want to do is open up a Finder window and go to desktop and there's the full song as MIDI. Drag that in. It says, do I want to import the tempo information? Well, we can actually go with our original tempo, which is 120, or we can import the tempo. And then it says, oh, I have a different frame rate. You might want to have that stay your original frame rate for your DAW. And there you go. It's all in there as one giant MIDI file. And you can see where it's changing in here too. So if you wanted to, you could actually go in and you could work with that. Or assign it to a different drum kit from a different manufacturer if you really want to. Anyway, the last little caveat I wanted to say, going through the Joe Ciccarelli stuff, because we haven't really been messing with that too much, I wanted to talk a little bit about the tape kits. So I'm going to go to the JC3 tape kit. Because what's different about the Ciccarelli kits is that when you get into the mixer, you'll note that the mixer has J37 tracks. That means that these are tape tracks. So for the kick, we get an additional tape kick. For the snare, we get an additional tape snare. Now, this is the summed top and bottom on this tape snare. Tape toms. Then we have the room mics and everything like that, which are left alone. One mic that we didn't have before was the shotgun mic. So that's a shotgun mic that's pointed at the snare that allows you to get kind of a different sound out of the kit. And then I think that's a distorted mic. Let's solo it. Yep. That's the crap mic. I love those kind of mics. You add them in and it just gives feel to a kit. So let's check this out. So that's awesome. I mean, they're just driving that tape as hard as they can. Let's hear what that sounds like if we just take it off tape and move it over to the non-tape tracks. So a lot less saturation, a little less of the tape compression going on. And a quick note, if you start mixing the kick with the tape kick, you're going to start to get some strange artifacts, mostly phasing and flanging, because they're not going to be perfectly in time. That's what makes tape interesting, is that as the tape is playing back, it's going to be like wavering and warbling because of wow and flutter. So it's just something to consider when you're checking out the Joe Ciccarelli kits. The Joe Ciccarelli kits are wonderful, like raw rock kits. They're really great. I suggest checking them out for rock projects, for pop projects where you want to have kind of an older sound and kind of a darker sound. They sound really wonderful. The kits themselves, if you go into the browser, you'll note that even though you have less kits, there's a lot of different mixes going on. We have like sort of industrial kits. Like if I go to heavy industry here and go to the mixer, you'll note that he's definitely playing around with, amp simulator and that sort of thing. And it's just a way different feel from Stent's feel. And I love it. I think these kits are just wonderful and wild. They just sound great. Again, there are powerful systems that you can get into. So if we go into the heavy industry powerful system, that's going to sound different than just the standard preset. And if you go to the kits with reference MIDI, just go through all of these and check them out, because they're basically going to show you, I love hippie drums. Let me pull that up. Get rid of this MIDI because the MIDI's been loaded into the player, we know, because of kits with reference MIDI. There it is. So there you go, Prodrummer 1 and 2. That's a nice broad overview of what these are capable of. These drums are punchy. They sound real. They sound like they were produced by professionals, because they were. Go through these things, explore them, and have a lot of fun. Definitely get an SSD drive so that the performance is there for you. I'd like to leave you now with a demo of Prodrummer in the context of an actual production. And I'll see you in our next cartoon. Take good care. Ciao.